November 14th, advanced class-ish. As we do our, some days more ish than others. As we get to our final outsiders conversation thing, test tomorrow, which we'll talk about. I have no one in here to torture as far as the missing homework goes. Your canned food drive, I believe, ends next week, and we should be good.
Canned food drive.
With Friday's e-learning, I just want to run through the 6 questions. 4 of them you did really well on. 2 of them y'all did really not so well on. So I figure I'll show them all to you.
Was it the main idea?
It was the main idea was one of them. Which statement best expresses the main idea of the article? Main idea means it has to cover the entire article. So what was the whole article about?
Today's medical idea is the And
So
I'd pick that one.
the one that says maggots are the larvae of flies was only a small part of it. Modern science won't accept disgusting cure was only a small part of it. That was most of it. And so I think
And
this
no
was
answer
the one
text
that
provided was none of
like
it.
50% of the kids got wrong. But
What? How? It's so obvious.
I would have thought so too, but we struggled. This one we did better on it. Why would people not choose maggots as a healing method?
Maggots. I would pass out if I saw maggots in my flesh.
And so, yeah, they work. I mean, as long as you use the right ones. But you can go on YouTube and see it. They'll take like a handful of maggots and push them into a wound. And
No.
Can you show us one of those videos?
I don't
show us. Can you show us?
You guys have
The
your own
sounds that it would make.
Do it at lunch.
Maggots and stuff. People eat maggots for fun.
True. You can fry them up. Oh no! 1 second, sorry. Oh, now you guys stop talking? Interesting. Oh, entertaining now. This was the other one you guys struggled on. The main purpose of the first paragraph. My guess is it came down to counting is hard because we don't know how to count to 1.
Wait, that was a question.
Yeah. So here's what it says. Here's the first paragraph right here. This says 2. This says 3.
That is
wait a
complicated.
minute.
What number comes before 2?
3.
This one is talking about how disgusting they are and how interesting they are. Number 2 says, what's the definition of maggots? I'm guessing by the O sounds that you're all giving,
I thought
you
that
now
was the
realize,
headline.
hey,
I thought that was the title.
how to count to 1.
Because it's in bold.
Yeah. The one that says the healing power of maggots, that was the title. This is the start of the article. So when it came to it, create interest in the subject, 70% of you put, define what a maggot is.
I'm part of the 70%.
If all of you claim you're part of the 30%, that means you're lying. Because we only
I can
have
proudly say
one
I'm
advanced
part
class
of
that
the
took it,
30%.
and a lot of kids who can't count to 1. This one you guys did better on. The summary that states the most important thing about the article. There you go. The other ones was just a small part. 5. Which the following be an effect of maggots looking creepy. Same thing you guys did.
Patients would not want to use maggots on themselves.
If doctor came in with a big old bucket full of maggots and said, it's time, you'd be like,
No! Punch the doctor in the face and jump out a window.
and what would be the cause of doctors using the maggots of blowflies?
The other maggots would eat your healthy flesh.
And that's where the problem comes in. The other maggots would go through there, and apparently if you put other maggots on there, then all of a sudden you don't have an arm. Blowfly maggots, they only eat dead flesh. Other maggots will eat everything. So if you just go and take like random maggots from outside and put them on your arm and go, I'm better, and then you come back and you're like, I have no arm, then we go, learning is painful.
I think, no, you'd have like a chunk of it missing, not the entire arm.
It depends on how long you let them sit there.
Yeah, and how much maggots you put in.
It's a little tickly. Just let it go.
It's really tickly. Wait, where's my arm go?
So back to outsiders from here. Let's talk about stuff. So yeah, now you can spoil things.
Pony Boy Dash.
All done.
Pony Boy was right Yeah.
I know. We're writing Pony
I
Boy.
knew Dolly died.
Not again.
So as we go back through it, I'm first seeing if you guys have questions over things before I get to my babbly stuff. The death of Dally with him showing up and running in, and then let's see, we covered Pony Boy right after. He does the whole passing out and the whole brain issues. And then the sickness, we did that one with you guys already. What happens when Randy comes? We did that one. We read that one together? Yeah. We did. Because what confusion does Pony Boy have?
That he thinks he killed Bob.
There you go. And why does he think he killed Bob?
Because he wants to know that because Johnny's quote-unquote still alive.
Pony Boy's confusion for Johnny and Bob and the not. Yeah, you guys just covered that. And
he thinks it's about the murder of Bob, but Johnny's dead.
What was it about?
His staying where he is family.
And what did the court decide?
He shall stay. He shall stay.
As long as you're not getting hunted by socias, you can stay. Pony Boy with school and friends.
He sucks.
All the socias hate him.
And part of that is understandable. When you realize how bad his life is, he no longer cares about school. His best friend is gone. He watched another kid die. Things have changed. And he's like, why would I care about school? And you kind of can't blame him. So then what happens to Pony that did that one? His English teacher does try to help him when he finds out that he's failing and says, hey, we can try to help you find a book. There it is. Pass class, but you're going to have to write this final essay, and as long as you give a good essay, I'll forgive your other grades, and then you're still good to pass. And what's the essay supposed to be about?
Any subject.
Close.
Any subject that's important to me.
There you go. Write about something that's important to you. And that's when he starts off thinking about the idea of like writing about his first visit to the zoo or something like that. And he's like, yay. Oh, and how long is it supposed to be? At least 5 pages, but then beyond that, he was like, it's up to you beyond that.
So he wrote like 100-page.
He did. So
oh yeah, Pony Boy.
he's not good at counting. It happens.
Pony Boy went crazy with the Coke bottle.
Page 171. I want to read that quick little scene to you.
He went a little crazy with the Coke bottle.
When he was about to
The
shoot
movie
you.
left out so much.
I know
They didn't even open it to the opening of the book.
There are
Depending on what version.
Yeah,
correct. There's 2 different versions, and if you watch the director's cut one, it's a little bit better. If you watch the main one that they have like out there for streaming, it's the movie release, and they cut it down and change a lot.
How do you get the director's cut?
You have to buy the DVD usually.
The DVD.
It's like a little spinny thing
I
that
don't know where to
goes.
put a DVD.
Well, I have a
But
DVD
it's
player.
not 1985. We should have buy
They
it.
I have a
didn't
DVD
have-
player.
Why did they cut out?
I have a lot of
Oh,
CDs.
right, they cut out.
I think you should write down the chorus name.
Turning down the anger and volume a little bit.
You put in the Xbox.
All right. So, starting on page 170, this is when the socias show up the next time when he's out there with Soda Pop. Oh no, who is it? 2-Bit. Thank you. Yes.
Fun fact, my dad has a Laserdisc player.
Good for him.
Good stuff. All right. I was sitting on the fender of Steve's car, smoking and drinking a Pepsi, while he and 2-Bit were inside talking to some girls. When a car drove up and 3 socias got out, I just sat there and looked at him and took another swallow of the Pepsi. I wasn't scared. It was the oddest feeling in the world. I didn't feel anything. Scared, mad, anything. Just zero.
That's when I thought he was turning into a Soch.
As far as I get ready to. Because what other greaser sort of felt the same way?
Dally.
And so this is the worry, is that now he's sort of turning into Dally about the whole turning off your feelings, because the problem with feelings is sometimes they hurt. And if you just get rid of feelings, like me, then you no longer have to worry about things like emotions and pain.
You know, I was going to say no, but then I realized it's true.
You're the guy that killed Bob Sheldon, one of them said. And he was a friend of ours. We don't like nobody killing our friends, especially greasers. By the way, that's a great line. We don't like anybody killing our friends, because I think the opposite would be like, we love people who come around stabbing our buddies. But anyway, big deal. I busted the end off my bottle and held on to the neck and tossed away my cigarette. You get back into your car, you'll get split. They looked kind of surprised, and one of them backed up. I mean it. I hopped off the car. I've had about all I can take from you guys. I started toward them, holding the bottle the way Tim Shepard holds a switch, out and away from myself in a loose but firm hold. I guess they knew I meant business because they got in their car and drove off. So that's him turning into Dally, and the fact that he's sort of just given up on everything and decided that he no longer cares. You really would have used that bottle, wouldn't you? Two-Bit had been watching from the store doorway. Steve and me were backing you, but I guess we didn't need to. You'd have really cut them up, huh? I guess so, I said with a sigh. I didn't see what Two-Bit was sweating about. Anyone else could have done the same thing, and Two-Bit would have thought about it twice. At the very beginning, when the Socias meet them on their walk in the girls' home,
Right,
and they hand him the bottle to use.
He just says he's not going to use it.
Yeah, that was his comment. He's like, I could never use one of these. I don't even know why he handed it to
I'm
me.
going to use it.
And now he's like, smash, come die. And so it's like that complete switch in his personality.
Then he picked up a piece.
Ponyboy, listen, don't get tough. You're not like the rest of us. Don't try to be. What was the matter with Two-Bit? I knew as well as he did that if you got tough, you don't get hurt. Get smart, and nothing can touch you. So he's trying to turn into Dally as much as he can. What in the world are you doing? Two-Bit's voice broke into my thoughts. I looked up at him. I'm picking up the glass. He stared at me for a second, then grinned. You little son of a gun, he said in a relieved voice. I didn't know what he was talking about, so I just went on picking up the glass from the bottle and put it in a trash can. I didn't want anyone to get a flat tire. Showing the fact that even when he's trying to be heartless and murderer and mean, he can't. He still has a good heart. He was like, yeah, I would have stabbed those people, but I don't want you to get a flat tire. That's just bad. And so it's the fact that in his heart, there's still goodness there. And that's what Two-Bit's meaning is the fact that, thank goodness, even though you're trying to be this horrible, mean person, your heart's not there. Because the last thing Dally would have done is picked up glass. He would have kicked it at cars driving by on the road. Jada.
What I would have done is I would have picked it up and slashed people's tires and then just leave it.
There you go. You're much more Dally. And that's what Ponyboy is not. So Ponyboy is now officially broken on the inside, but we have found out through this that there's still good in him. When he gets the fight between Soda and Derry where they're yelling at each other, and then Soda takes off running and they have to run across the park and tackle him and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was
didn't
fun.
have that.
And then, I
yeah.
totally forgot
That
to
was
talk
awesome.
about the thing with Sandy earlier in the book.
Sandy.
Oh, yeah.
Sandy, his girlfriend.
Oh, he got a letter.
So this was back when they came back from the church, and he finds out that Soda and Sandy, who they kept talking about at the beginning, that was the boyfriend-girlfriend, and that Sandy takes off and is gone, and she
I imagine the
leaves.
squirrel from SpongeBob.
So
SquarePants.
there's a reason why she leaves that I don't think you guys picked up on why she left. Because he says, hey, she left because it was either that or get married, and she was too young to get married.
No,
and so
she said that her parents didn't want her
Correct.
to get married.
So either she had to move away for 9 months, or they had to get married.
Oh.
Oh.
Was it 9 months? When did it happen?
It doesn't. That's why I'm helping you out. So
She was pregnant.
she was pregnant.
They didn't say anything.
Wait, what?
So this is where
She was pregnant?
you guys not knowing the old 1960s vernacular, and it's like at the time that was very obvious to people. Nowadays, not so obvious, because that was back during this time period. If a girl got pregnant in high school, you either got married or she went to go visit family for 9 months, and then she would come back. And so that was just sort of a thing. And that's when they say, like, she went to go down to visit family, or we had to get married. For you guys, like, oh yeah, she had to go family. That's the thing that. But back then, that was not a thing that happened. And then to the new one with Sandy on page 174.
Why? Once again, my mind has been shattered.
Where is it? So now that you know that, I'm going to read the page 174, and it's going to take on a different meaning. So this was when they're at the park, and Soda has now run away, and he's crying, and they're talking. And it says, don't! Oh, you guys, why can't you? He jumped up suddenly and bolted out the door. Derry and I were struck dumb. Derry picked up the envelope that Soda had dropped. "It's the letter he wrote Sandy," Derry said without expression. "It's returned unopened." So that's what had been bugging Soda all afternoon. And I hadn't even bothered to find out. And while I was thinking about it, I realized that I'd never paid much attention to Soda's problems. Derry and I just took it for granted that he didn't have any. When Sandy went to Florida, it wasn't Soda, Ponyboy. He told me he loved her, but I guess she didn't love him like he thought she did, because it wasn't him. So
He is not the father.
So that's the part that I don't think you picked up on the subtlety.
No, I didn't.
Now,
You are not the father.
and then that's where it goes on to say he wanted to marry her anyway, but she just left. So even knowing that he's not the father, he still loved her and still offers to try and marry her. But instead,
Even though she's a horrible girlfriend.
yeah,
How
well,
does she do that to him?
the 1960s version of leaving him unread, she just like sends the letter back to him. And so it's like, I'm assuming that's the normal version now of when you send a message and it just sits there unread and you're like, what's going on? And that's what she did. She just sent the letter straight back and was like, nope, Smithy.
So is this the time period of 1960s?
Yeah, that's when it's supposed to be.
Wait, so when my grandpa's been...
Right around there, yeah.
When was your grandpa born?
So then we get to Johnny's final letter. Read that one on page
That
5.
one was so sad. That was
Agreed.
sad.
It was... I feel no emotions when reading a book unless a character.
So where does he find the letter?
In the gun.
In the Gone with the Wind book. So this was supposed to be read a long time ago, but he's just now getting
It's
around
a
to
book. It's not sad.
it. Says, Ponyboy, I asked the nurse to give you this book so you could finish it. It was Johnny's handwriting. I went on reading, almost hearing Johnny's quiet voice. The doctor came in a while ago, but I knew anyway. I keep getting tireder and tireder. Listen, I don't mind dying now. It's worth it. It's worth saving those kids. Their lives are worth more than mine. They have more to live for. Some of their parents came by to thank me, and I knew it was worth it. Tell Dally it's worth it. I'm just going to miss you guys. I've been thinking about it. And that poem, that guy that wrote it, he meant you're gold when you're a kid, like green. When you're a kid, everything's new. It's like the dawn. It's just when you get used to everything that it's day, like the way you dig sunsets, Pony. That's gold. Keep that way. It's a good way to be. I want you to tell Dally to look at one. He'll probably think you're crazy, but ask for me. I don't think he's ever really seen a sunset. And don't be so bugged over being a greaser. You still have a lot of time to make yourself be what you want. There's still lots of time in the world. Tell Dally, I don't think he knows. Your buddy, Johnny. And then it jumps to the very end. That's what inspires him to write the very end. So I'm going to read that very last two paragraphs at the bottom of page 179. So this is where he contacts his English teacher, Mr. Syme. Mr. Syme, this is Ponyboy. That essay, how long can it be? Not less than 5 pages. He sounded a little surprised. I'd forgotten it was late at night. Yeah, don't be calling your English teachers in the middle of the night. Not a good idea.
Okay.
Can it be longer? Certainly, Ponyboy, as long as you want it. Thanks. I sat down and picked up my pen and thought for a minute, remembering a handsome, dark boy with a reckless grin and a hot temper, a tough, tow-headed boy with a cigarette in his mouth and a bitter grin on his hard face, remembering, and this time it didn't hurt, a quiet, defeated-looking 16-year-old whose hair needed cutting badly and who had black eyes with a frightened expression to them. 1 week had taken all 3 of them, and I decided I could tell people, beginning with my English teacher. Now, I wondered for a long time how to start that theme, how to start writing about something that was important to me. And I finally began like this. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only 2 things on my mind. Paul Newman and a Ride Home.
So it starts.
It took me a minute to figure out who the third guy was.
So,
It's Bob.
yeah. So the first one, a handsome dark boy with a reckless grin and a hot temper.
Bob.
That's Bob.
Yeah, it took me a minute to
And
figure
then
that out.
the tough toe-headed boy with a cigarette in his mouth. Dowie. And then defeated-looking 16-year-old whose hair needed cutting. That's Johnny. And where have you seen that line before about two things on my mind, Paul Newman and a Ride Home? Which is why I made such a big deal about Paul Newman when we first started it, because I know it plays that role here, and I figure if I make that big deal about Paul Newman, when you see the name again, you're like, didn't Mr. Brovicast talk about, oh, and like the learning gets all tingly.
That kind of happened.
Wally?
Oh,
So we went to the store and I saw some of Paul Newman's stuff and I said, hey look, there's Paul Newman, and my parents looked at me like I was a lunatic.
Well, I'm hoping it's because they were so impressed and shocked you knew who Paul Newman was, and not that they didn't know, and they're like, why do you know this old white man on here? And you're just like, they thought you were just naming bottles. That's Paul Newman, that's Johnny Johnson, and you're just like going by like naming random food products, and they're like, our son needs help. Which could be, that might be why they gave you that particular look. So, questions from you guys before I get to my babbly stuff. Anything that bothered and or confused you in the book before I get to talk again? No. What do you want? Yay. Then, to give you guys a bit of background on this book, one, I think if you go to the back, there's like an interview in there, but I'm assuming most of you don't know this.
It's the interview. It's the new book.
Yeah.
And then there's the interviews before it.
Yeah. Jimmy Jam?
Is there a sequel to this book?
There is, which we'll talk about in a second.
That was then.
Is it the inside?
Are we gonna read it?
No.
You can read it on your own right here.
Is it
No.
in the back?
They have like a.
Yeah, they got like a little. They got like.
Is it that was then, this is now?
Yeah. It literally says strong pastry next to the books.
Yeah. I mean, I have copies of it if you want it, and I can tell you more about it.
Does it actually have?
Just come and see me. So, with this book, it was written by a girl, Susan Elaine Hinton, when she was 16 years old. And so she actually wrote it when she was in high school, and it started off because she hated the books her English teacher was making the class read. And she actually got into an argument with her English teacher where she called him out and said, I hate these books that you're making us read. And his response was, if you hate the books I'm making you read, why don't you write one better than that? So she did.
That aged well.
And so she actually wrote it about her friends, and she put herself in the book. She is one of the characters in the book.
Cherry!
She is Cherry. And what happened in her hometown, there were these, and she grew up in Oklahoma, so basically set it in her hometown of Tulsa, is the fact that she had these two groups of friends, these really poor kids and these really rich kids. And she was friends with both groups, and they kept getting into fights in town. That whole getting into the rumbles and the beating each other up and the jumping each other based on fact happening in her town. And she got upset because it kept getting worse and worse, and she told her social friends and the greaser friends, she's like, hey, if you guys keep this up, somebody's going to get really hurt and die. And so they were like, whatever, stabbing kids is fun. And so she decided to write her book about what would happen if this thing I keep telling my friends is going to happen actually happens. And so she wrote a book where one of her friends dies. And most of this was based around her friends in high
Did
school.
she give it to her friends? And be like,
so, and that's why, like, I know the second one you'll get to says for David, and that is actually her husband. And she actually dated him in high school. In the book, he is a character. He is one of the socials. In the, not Bob. He's actually named David in the story. And there is the scene when Ponyboy is getting drowned. There's one thing there where Bob yells, David, get him! And that would be one of the social friends that goes and jumps and gets Ponyboy. And then that would be her guy that she had a crush on in high school. She put him in the book, and then she eventually marries him. And that became like her husband. And so that's little connections that go into it.
but who's...
The Jimmy one I don't know about. Jada.
Does somebody actually die?
In real life, lots of people have died in real life. In her town, no. When she wrote this, it actually helped and sort of brought a whole bunch of attention to it, and it sort of died off after that. No pun intended. And so that helped with the whole hurting each other thing, and so as far as that part goes. So, as far as the sequel goes, one, I have copies if you want to come see me when I hook you up with one. Now, just so you are aware, it is a sequel. It's set in the same town, but it does not follow the same characters. It takes place about 2 years later. I think Ponyboy is now a junior in high school, and it's sort of like the fallout of all these things afterwards. It follows 2 other characters that are there, Brian and Mark, who are not in The Outsiders at all, but there is overlap. Like Ponyboy becomes one of the friends who plays the main role in it. You know Tim Shepard, the one who ran the Shepard gang? He kept talking about his brother Curly, who was in jail. Curly plays a big role in the story. It's like the main bad guy. And so Curly Shepard comes back to it and stuff like that. So it's set in the same town. It does have death in it. This one is not so much about bullying. It goes a different direction. It's a bit more adult. It deals more with drug use and what do you do when your friends go down that path. And so my regular kids read it because it is a good way of looking at it, and the fact that it never comes out and says good or bad. It's just sort of like what happens to these kids when your best friend starts making poor choices.
I cut them out of my life
do you go down that same path with them or not?
And that is why we have the SEL lessons.
Yeah,
About that.
why we have our
SEL in like 5 weeks.
Of course, I have classroom on Thursday.
Of course,
College fourth period.
Of course, guys.
Nobody.
So, final discussion questions for you. Do you feel Ponyboy is a good person?
Nah.
All right.
Nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
And Johnny?
Nah.
Yeah.
You didn't kill him.
Everybody's a good person.
Bob?
Everybody's
You're not.
Yes.
Well, Bob was drunk.
And that's where it goes back and forth. Now, so now that we find out, why did Bob do what he did?
Because he's drunk and dumb.
Part of it was drunk, but why was he getting drunk all the time?
Because his parents wouldn't stop him.
And so I see that a lot here. A lot of times when you guys see kids in junior high who make poor choices here, it's because they're not getting punished at home. Those of you who don't like your parents because they punish you for bad choices, Bob is what happens on the opposite spectrum. And we have a lot of bullies at our school who are bullies because their parents do the exact same things Bob's parents did. Oh yeah. A number of kids that you guys will be, when I have conversation with the students about bullies, I am in a unique situation where I have a lot of kids come back and talk to me, either through Remind or in person. And often I have kids who get bullied come back and talk to me, and I also have the bullies come back and talk to me. And it's interesting on my end to have a kid come in and say, you know, Bobby's been bullying me and doing all these awful things. And then a month later, Bobby would be like, can I come in and talk? And I'm like, well, this will be interesting. And then Bobby comes in and talks, and you find out the fact that how unhappy Bobby is. And the fact that I've seen those exact same things where parents just don't hold kids responsible for their choices. And when that happens, kids keep pushing limits. Part of what kids like to do, and it's natural as a teenager, is you push limits until someone tells you not to do a thing. It's what you're supposed to do as a kid. It's how you figure out the world. And when you don't have a parent that gives you limits, you keep pushing until someone gives you a limit. Whether that be a teacher or the police or the law, kids will eventually push until someone gives them a limit, or death. And so almost every time we have bullies, it's connected to something going on at home. Bob was not physically abused by parents, but I assume in some way he was mentally abused in the fact that they abandoned him. Tomorrow, we have a test. I sent out a practice one on Remind tonight if you want to do it.